Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Empowered to Live. I am your host, Andrea Rose Butler, Becoming Woman's Network. So glad to have you here on the second Thursday of this new year. So glad that you could join us on this evening. And we are starting a new series, and that new series is called Foundations of Purpose. And so I'm just so excited for you all being here. And I got so excited, I didn't even do my intro. And so that is Empowered to Live, where faith meets purpose and purpose fuels freedom. And so I am, again, so happy to be here and so glad that we made it already to our second Thursday. This month is moving so quickly, and we don't want to miss it. We don't want to miss what God's doing in this new year. And so we are building our foundation. We're building that foundation of purpose. You know that that's what I'm all about. Making sure that you're walking in purpose, that you're doing what you were created to do and to be. And this is what the Becoming Woman's Network is all about. You becoming the person that God created you to be. And Mary, my pastor, always says that we are human beings and not human doings. And so we do stuff, but that's not who we are. And so we're talking about the foundation of our purpose. Where does it? And so this week we're talking about where does it all begin? And if you've ever asked, what am I supposed to be doing with my life? Then this episode is for you. What's my life all about? Why am I here? I heard so many people ask that question. Why am I here? And that good question comes from Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5. And it says, before I formed you, I knew you. And before you were born, I set you apart to be. That's he told him he was a prophet and all this other stuff. But that was Jeremiah. But for us, God has set us apart to be. And so purpose doesn't start with what you do. It's not your job title. It's not your ministry role. It's not your plans that you have planned out. It starts out with who you are and who God is. And so today we're going to talk about how to dismantle the myth that we have to find our purpose and reframe it as something that we discover through our relationship with God. So purpose begins with God's intention and not our ambition. And so before you ever did anything, God already knew you. He knew who you were. He said, before you were even formed in your mother's womb, he said, I knew you and I'd already set you apart. And so you are here with a purpose, for a purpose. And this is why you're here. So you're not an accident. Somebody may have told you that. Somebody may have told you that, you're worthless and and you may even feel that, I have no meaning. There's no reason for me to be here. God set you apart. He caused you, He allowed you to be born because He had purpose in mind for you before you were even formed in your mother's womb. So we're going to dismantle that lie of the enemy that said to you, there's no reason for you to be here, and you matter to someone. And I've shared this before, that I keep this sign up in my room that used to be at my desk at work that says that you are somebody's miracle, and so therefore you matter. And that is always reminding me that I am and you are somebody's miracle. You may not have encountered that person, and maybe you have and you just didn't know the impact that you may have had on somebody's life. Maybe because you smile at them, maybe you let them go in line before you. Maybe they needed to turn while you were driving, and you let them go. Any of those things, you don't know how impactful your life may be. And I mean, we may never know on this side of eternity, but it does matter. It does matter. And so if you don't get anything from today, I want you to know that you matter, that you are here for a purpose. There is a reason for your existence. You're not just taking up space or any of those things. There is purpose inside of you. And you don't need to find it. What we need to do is connect to the source which is God, and let him reveal it to you. So before you made a mistake, before you did anything wrong, that again, that purpose is not earned, it is revealed. So many of us, we've exhausted ourselves because we were trying to achieve purpose instead of abiding in the one who gives it to you. So stay connected. And so what are some of the things that hinders us? What are some challenges that we may have to walk in and knowing where our purpose is? So believing our purpose is tied to performance. Again, we're trying to do it instead of be it. We are the purpose. We were created before he said, I've set you apart for a purpose, for a reason. That's why you're here. And so we want to perform it. And people have told us this, we've talked about this in previous episodes where, as children, our parents or those who shape our formative years may have told us that, you're a good little girl because you did this, or you're a good little boy. And so, well, we crave that. And so we perform to get the applause, but that's not your purpose. And it shouldn't be tied to that. And so when we don't measure up, and this is where we become performance based believers, workers, in relationships, we perform instead of just being who we are. And then you're around somebody else who is also performing. And so when you have two actors on the stage, you don't know who the real person is, because we've been told to perform. And that's where applause and a validation comes in. And so it's not about our performance, it's about us being. Our very existence is our purpose, it's our reason. So comparing your calling to someone else's, stay in your lane. That's what I'm gonna say about that one. Stay in your lane. We always want to look around and, well, what are they doing? Oh, they are, they get to do this. And there are thousands of podcasts out there. There are even some called Empowered to Live, which I did not know. But now you know. And so they are out there, and there are people who are doing, who have their podcasts, but they have a different audience, and their message is different, regardless of whether or not it's the same name. And so I don't look at what they're doing and said, oh, I wish mine was like. My audience is the audience that God has given me. So I'm not going to compare this podcast or the work that I've been called to do to somebody else's, because that's theirs and it's mine. So we're running the same race. We're all in the same race, but we run our race differently. We stay in our lane. We're not going to look around to the right or left. This is where we stumble and we fall, and then people keep running, and because we have lost our focus. Feeling left behind. That's always a big one. I remember in my younger years, I remember that, I had led, she was a coworker at the time, became great friends, to Christ, and I led her to Christ. And then she went on, and then her and her husband, she got remarried, and they started the church. And I'm like, okay, God, what? They had moved on and they were doing great things. And I'm looking like, how? But I led her to Christ. Why? God was like, don't run that. And you remind me about Andrew. In the scriptures, Andrew is the brother of Peter, and he brought his brother to Jesus. And then you don't really hear much more about Andrew anymore, except there's a few he sprinkled in here and there. You don't really hear much about him after he brings his brother. He kind of fades into the background, and so you may feel that you're behind, you're left out. Like your purpose may have been to bring someone to Christ so that they can do great things, and that's your job, to you bring people and they do great things. And so that you're measuring your life based on that. And this is what God had reminded me. He was just like, you are my Andrew. And that it hurt a little bit, but eventually I got over it, because I see, as I've gotten older and matured. I say older, matured, I learned that sometimes we are Andrew. And our purpose is, to do this work and then move on. We're still working, and our purpose is still the same, to bring people and place them before Jesus. And they may elevate greater than you, but that's not your job. It's not your business. And so you may feel that way, that you're behind because other people are passing you. Don't worry about it. I shared before too, like when I did my first 10K. I was walking at the Monument 10K in Richmond, my first one. People were running past me, and they were running, and I'm just walking, and I'm like, how long is this? How much further do I have to go? And some of these people that ran past me dropped out. Now I could have felt like, and when I'm seeing them running past me and they were going, and I was like, I'm just going to keep my pace. I'm just going to keep walking. And then I passed them. Some of them had stopped. They burned out. And so you may feel that, you're left behind. You keep moving. You keep moving. Don't worry about it. They had their race. They ran their race. And there are others who ran their race, and they ran past me, and they made it to the finish line. And they were there at the end, and they were cheering me on as I was crossing over. But I kept my pace, and I ran my race because I was focusing on, I need to finish this race. No matter what happens, I need to get done. And all of us are in that place. So don't feel that you're left behind. You're at the pace that God wants you to be at. So don't worry about it. You just keep moving. Now be like Dory, just keep swimming. You just keep walking. You keep doing. You keep being who God created you to be, and not just like, oh, I'm behind now, so I'm going to stop. No, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving forward. Waiting for clarity before obedience. Sometimes we can sit, and I've talked about this before. God gives us this command of preparation, and we're sitting there, and we can be like Gideon. We need fleeces. We're like, let the sun shine on half this leaf, and let this happen, and then we get stuck. And I shared too, before I even got started with doing this podcast, that was my issue. I was looking for perfection. I needed this to happen. I needed this kind of equipment. I wanted to do this. I needed these kind of graphics. I was going to get all this stuff. I was like, we're going to order shirts. We're going to get it all done. And I was like, no, just start. I told you, to do this. What are you doing? And we can be stuck instead of doing. We get into that analysis, paralysis of analysis. We're sitting there and we're like trying to figure it out. And I was like, I told you to go to the other side, or just go, instead of getting stuck. And so we can do that. We can sit there, God, I need more information. And he was like, I told you to go. I told you to do this. And we're stuck seeking more, and maybe that wasn't God. And he's like, I told you, let's go do this, and I go say that, write that book, go back to school, whatever it is that he told you to do. Write that song. Maybe asking you even to sing at church, and you're like, no, God hasn't told me to. And you know that you've got a beautiful voice, and you won't use it. Maybe because you've heard voices in your head, and you're comparing your voice, to somebody else, instead of singing and using the voice, the gift that God has given to you to use, because he has a purpose behind you using the voice that you have to sing, to speak, to whatever it is that is tied to your purpose. So how do we overcome it? Again, shift from doing to being. Your purpose is you. You are the purpose, not the stuff that you do. You are your purpose. My friend Charvette, said you are your brand. It doesn't matter about brand colors, and I've gotten them, and you can see them on the screen. You are the brand when you show up. So you are purpose. It's not about what, it's your being, who you are, who God created you to be, is the purpose for what you are to do. And so don't get tied in I'm going to talk about that next week, about identity. How are we rooted in who we are? We're going to talk about that next week. So spend time with God without an agenda. That's a hard one because we want to come with our lists, like Santa Claus. Here's my list of stuff, God. And he was like, just sit with me and let me speak to you. Be still and know that I am God. Let me speak to you. Let me pour into you. Let me, download the script that I have for you. And he's going to take it little by little and he's going to give it to you. But it's tied to your obedience. Have you taken the first step? And so sit down and listen and say, God, where am I stuck? Why am I stuck? Why do I feel like that you're calling me to be more, but I feel like I'm being left behind. I'm feeling held up, and just sit and let him talk to you and let him share with you why you may feel that way. Maybe you're comparing yourself and you're stuck in that comparison mode. So ask the question and then sit and listen without any agenda, without any plans or nothing. Stop measuring your purpose by productivity. Talked about this before too, that we've been conditioned to get out to be productive. Let's churn out this book. We got the hustle and grinding and all of these different things. That's the culture that we live in, about hustling and grinding and doing all this stuff. Even on our work, they want you to produce. How many customers did you talk to? How many patients did you see? How many this? How many cars did you clean? And so we live in this mindset. Even in school, they start training you early about productivity, and that we are producing. And so they've called us to be productive, to do stuff. And sometimes then we miss out on what purpose is because we feel like we have to produce all the time. And so we have that productivity manual. And so if I'm not doing XYZ, then I'm not productive enough. Like I said, it could be one person that you bring to Christ, and that was your purpose. And then the rest of it is living and giving worship and making sure that you are staying connected and and showing kindness and all these different things. And you were looking like, oh, I needed to be on this big stage. I need to turn out 20 books. I need to be a New York Times bestseller. I need to be a Grammy Award winning artist. Who says? Who says? We were talking about this in Sunday school this past Sunday, about the widow's mite and those who gave out of their abundance, and she gave out of her poverty. And God said her little that she gave, that 2 copper pennies, was worth more than the people who gave out of their much. And so sometimes it may be that God is saying your purpose is the 2 widows' mite, and we want to be the one that's lavished with stuff where people are talking about us. And she gave little, and Jesus brought attention to her. And so maybe this is what God is calling for you to do. Give the little that you have. Do what you know to do. Be who you were created to be. And that's focusing on anything else. So not about productivity. I trust that obedience reveals direction. Like I said, sometimes God is telling you, go do this. Whether it's opening the door for someone, go walk across the street, talk to your neighbor. And in that going is where revelation comes, and not necessarily in the stuff that we feel that, the grand things, the grand gestures, like I said, that, we want to be on the big stage. Well, maybe our stage may be a little thing, because God is developing you. He's got you in an incubator in the back, and you want the big stage, but you're not ready for it. And so ask God to reveal that. So for the writers, I've got you every week. For my journalers, again, I'm not one of those people, but for the journalers. So when did you first feel the pull towards something meaningful? When did God start revealing and you know it? And I share about this, when I am talking my coaching, or in my book, Renewing Your Dreams. What is that one thing that you have that you can't let go of it? That's your purpose. You know, what is that thing that it's like burning, and it may be in you from the time you were young, and you've had this feeling, you know, that you should be here or you should be doing this, and there's that thing on the inside of you that you can't shake it. You know, I think back to, you know, the Becoming Woman's Network, and I remember that came out of a scripture that at one of my lowest points that a friend had sent to me. She wrote me a letter back in the day before internet, and I still have that letter to this day. And it's basically, you know, comes from Corinthians, where he says that, you know, once you have gone through, you know, that the suffering that you have experienced, that it's not basically not for you, but it's for other people. And so all the things that I have walked through in life, you know, from homelessness, from, you know, domestic violence, sexual assault, you know, even having cancer, even maybe even this move to Mexico, all of those things were for a purpose, you know, for a reason. And there is someone who needs to overcome or needs to know that God is a deliverer. And so we go through things not for ourselves, but we comfort them with the comfort we ourselves have received. And this was the impetus for the Become a Woman's Network. And then it was sitting there, you know, I look back, you know, I called it, you know, it was like El Shaddai Ministries. I was doing stuff with that, working with single parents, doing different things you know, that. But I noticed that, you know, when I even worked for CBN, that these were people that I was drawn to. The volunteerism that I did was in these underserved communities, even though I was living in underserved communities at one point, and even at that point, you know, talking to my neighbors, doing stuff like that, holding um, workshops and all those different things. But I even, you know, until God had been building and training me in those things. And, you know, I still have some of the stuff that I wrote about, some of the things that I wanted to do, and here we are today. You know, some over 20 plus years later, walking out that vision of where I am right now. And I am being that. And so so that becoming was a transformative and transformation, and that we are becoming who God created me and you to be. And this is where the Becoming Woman's Network comes from, that we are being transformed. And our symbol is a butterfly, which it's transformed out of that, you know, colors, the purple for domestic violence, pink, and even when I chose this breast cancer, and the goal that when you go through and you've gone through difficult seasons, you're going to come out of as pure gold. And this is where, you know, the colors of the Become a Woman's Network is what they represent. And when we were designing, thinking about this, I was like, oh, these colors, not knowing really why at the time, because even I had the pink before I was even diagnosed with breast cancer. That was already there, and not knowing, but God knew, because He knew before He formed me in my mother's womb and He set me apart. He knew that I was going to go through this, and so He gave me these colors to represent what He wanted me to be and to become, and what He wants you to become. So how might God have been shaping my purpose long before I recognize it? And I share with you. So that's something we want to think about. You know, what has God been showing you? How has He been shaping you, your purpose, long before you even recognize it? Because I didn't. I didn't recognize what God was doing, but He did. And so He was molding me, and I was becoming. And you too are becoming. And so He wants you to recognize that. So for challenge time, so spend 10 minutes a day this week simply sitting with God, with no requests, no plans, no agendas, just sitting in His presence. Our church is getting ready to start our 21-day fast this weekend as well. And so this is, if you want to join us in that time of consecration, you are more than welcome to join us during that time. So we're starting on the 11th and we're going through to the 31st. All right. So if you want to hop on and join us, you are welcome to do that. So let the relationship be your foundation. And that foundation starts in prayer, building that relationship. So purpose doesn't start when you arrive, it starts when you listen. So you sit and you listen, as you're writing, God, when did you start pulling me towards this? What is those things that has been within inside of me that I can't let go of? Start there. And how might God been shaping you for a purpose that you did not even recognize? Look at there are signs all around us, but we need to be aware of them. And this is where we miss it, that awareness, because we're so busy chasing and we're so distracted. But if we sit down and we take that time and we're still, which I know is hard, because I know sometimes when I'm sitting, my mind is racing and I'm thinking about a million other things. And so I have to, like, God, silence the noise in my mind so I can hear you, so I can see what you're doing. I need to know what it is that you want from me. Even as I grow in the calling that He has for me in this Becoming Women's Network, in our foundation. Why am I back in school and the type of education that I'm getting right now? There's purpose behind everything that we've experienced, and it's all culminating into our purpose, into what we're being, because that's inside of you. Remember, your purpose is your being. It's you. You are the brand of your purpose. And we sit in that and we recognize that we are being called. And so, again, if you don't take anything away from this, you are your purpose. So your being, your very existence is purpose. You are here with purpose, for a purpose. God has a plan for your life before you were even formed in your mother's womb. He knew you, He set you apart, and He has called you to be whatever it is that He has called you to be. That's who you are. You are somebody's miracle. So hold on to that when the voices and the noises come. I want you to hold on and let that go deep for you. And as we wrap up this evening, I want you to remember that, again, purpose doesn't start when you arrive. It starts when you listen. So, like we just told the kids, get your listening ears on. So listen, find time to be quiet before Him this week. Even after we end here, silence the noise, turn the phone off, do whatever, put it on do not disturb so that you can hear it, you can listen. So I want you to join me next week as we talk about rooting your purpose in who you are. So it's about identity. Again, who are you? And then God, I pray that He will reveal that to you in the days leading up to this. And as you sit quietly before Him and listen, that He will bring that revelation. So again, thank you all for joining me this evening for another episode of Empowered to Live. Until live on purpose, because you were created for a purpose. Have a great night, and I will see you all next week. Night.